I've walked the gauntlet of these markets, felt the cold grip of panic and the burning fever of greed. I've seen fortunes rise and fall, not by the whims of some invisible hand, but by the frantic, often self-destructive dance of the human mind. The more you trade, the faster you lose, isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a scar etched deep into the soul of every trader who's ever chased a whisper or feared missing a single beat. It's a truth I learned the hardest way possible. A truth Livermore himself wrestled with, long before I ever stepped into the arena. The psychological theme at the heart of this truth is the brutal conflict between patience and overtrading, inextricably linked to the battle between discipline and emotion. It's the constant tension of knowing you should wait, but feeling an unbearable urge to act. It's the silent war waged within, where the desire for constant engagement, the need to do something, overrides the clear, cold logic of strategy. This isn't about charts or indicators. It's about the relentless psychological pressure to be perpetually in motion, believing that activity equates to progress, when often it's the fastest route to ruin. The central tension, the unspoken conflict I felt, and that I know many traders feel, is this. I knew, deep down, I should wait for clarity, for my edge to manifest. But I couldn't bear the silence. The market's stillness felt like a personal affront, a challenge to my very existence as a trader. Every tick I wasn't in, every potential move I wasn't part of, screamed like a missed opportunity, a personal failure. I traded not because the setup was perfect, but because I couldn't stand the thought of not trading. This isn't just impatience, it's a profound discomfort with inaction. A fear that if you're not constantly engaged, you're not a real trader, or worse, you're losing out. My own journey through this particular hell was paved with overconfidence and a desperate need for validation. I believed that my intelligence, my analytical prowess, would somehow shield me from these universal human flaws. I was wrong. The market cares nothing for intellect, only for discipline. I chased every whisper, every flickering candle. I felt compelled to act, to prove my worth, not to the market, but to myself. This constant need for engagement, this internal drumbeat, demanding action, it was a slow poison. It blurred my vision. It eroded my judgment. I remember the gnawing emptiness when I sat idle. The screen, a silent judge. The market, a restless beast I felt obligated to tame. I confused observation with passivity. I mistook patience for weakness. Every moment of quiet felt like an opportunity slipping through my grasp. A missed trade, in my mind, was a loss. Not a loss of capital, but a loss of self-esteem. A blow to my perceived competence. This was the trap. The self-imposed pressure to be perpetually active, perpetually on. It promised control, but delivered chaos. The urge was primal. A deep-seated fear of being irrelevant, of not participating. It was a fear that whispered, if you're not trading, you're not earning. If you're not earning, you're falling behind. This internal narrative was relentless. It pushed me into trades that lacked conviction, into positions without a clear edge. I wasn't waiting for the market to reveal itself. I was forcing my will upon it. This forcing, this desperate need to impose my presence, invariably led to poor entries, to emotional exits, to a slow bleed of capital. Each loss, rather than teaching me patience, fueled a renewed urgency. A need to get back in, to make it back. The cycle was vicious. The more I traded, the more I lost. The more I lost, the more desperate I became to trade my way out. It was a paradox. The solution lay in inaction, yet my mind screamed for action. Livermore knew this. He spoke of the big money being made not in the buying or selling, but in the waiting. Waiting for the right time. Waiting for confirmation. Waiting for the market to align with one's thesis. But waiting felt like an eternity. It felt like surrender. My ego demanded engagement. My fear demanded validation. I saw others, seemingly always active, always in the game. I compared myself. I felt inadequate. This comparison, this external validation seeking, it was another layer of the psychological torment. It wasn't about the charts anymore. It was about my identity as a trader. Was I truly one if I wasn't constantly engaged? This question haunted me. It drove me. It drove me into trades I should have avoided. It drove me to ignore my own rules. I ignored my own rules. The lines I drew, the limits I set, they dissolved under the relentless assault of my own impatience. Each transgression felt like a small rebellion, a fleeting moment of defiant control against the market's indifference. But it was a false control, a self-deception. The cost was immediate, tangible. Small losses accumulated, not the calculated risks of a disciplined strategy, but the random, chaotic outcomes of impulsive action. My capital, once a tool, became a scorecard of my emotional failures. It dwindled, not in dramatic crashes, but in a steady, insidious bleed. Each withdrawal, each red number, was a stark reminder of my broken promises to myself. I blamed the market. I blamed the news. I blamed anything but the mirror. The truth, cold and unyielding, was that I was my own worst enemy. My hands, guided by fear and greed, were the ones orchestrating my downfall. The silence of waiting, the discipline of patience, those were the true strengths. I had mistaken them for weaknesses. I saw them as opportunities for others, not for me. My fear of missing out was not a fear of missing profit, but a fear of missing life, missing meaning in the market's grand drama. I needed to be part of it, to feel the pulse, even if that pulse was leading me to ruin. The exhaustion was profound. Not just physical, from hours staring at screens, but mental, emotional. The constant internal battle drained me. Sleep offered no escape. The trades replayed, the missed opportunities haunted. The market became a tormentor, reflecting every flaw, every impulse. It held up a mirror to my undisciplined self. It showed me my desperate need for external validation, my overconfidence masquerading as skill, my inability to simply be without doing. Livermore's words echoed, not as advice, but as a prophecy I was fulfilling. He spoke of the human element being the most dangerous factor. He knew he had lived it. The market doesn't care about your intelligence, your desires, your ego. It only responds to the flow of capital, driven by collective human emotion. My individual emotional chaos was just a tiny, insignificant ripple. But to me, it was everything. It was my world crumbling. I yearned for clarity, for a moment of peace, but I was caught in a self-made maelstrom. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. I had to learn to stop struggling. I had to learn to let go of the desperate need to constantly engage. The realization was slow, painful. It wasn't about finding the perfect indicator or the infallible system. It was about finding the stillness within myself. It was about recognizing that the market wasn't a game to be constantly played, but a river to be observed. Sometimes, the wisest action is no action at all. This stillness, this deliberate detachment, felt alien. It felt like surrendering my identity. But the alternative was self-destruction. The path I was on, the path of relentless activity, was a guaranteed route to zero. I had to confront the fear of inaction, the deep-seated belief that my worth was tied to my trading frequency. That belief was a lie, a dangerous, costly lie. The market had stripped away my illusions, one trade at a time. It had shown me the brutal truth of my own psychological vulnerabilities. The battle wasn't with the charts. It was with the man behind the screen. It was with the relentless urge to do, when the greater wisdom lay in the capacity to wait. This was the ultimate lesson. Not a lesson learned quickly or icily, but forged in the crucible of repeated, self-inflicted pain. It was a lesson about humility, about respect for the market's rhythm, not my own manufactured urgency. It was about understanding that true power in trading comes from restraint, not from relentless motion. I had to unlearn everything my ego had taught me. I had to embrace the discomfort of silence, the perceived emptiness of inactivity. Because in that silence, true opportunity reveals itself. In that stillness, capital is preserved, and only then can it grow. The market became a crucible. My resolve was tested daily, hourly. The initial attempts at true inaction felt like a betrayal of my very purpose. My fingers twitched, drawn to the keyboard, to the flicker of numbers. Every silent minute stretched into an eternity, filled with the phantom screams of missed opportunities. It was an addiction, the need for constant stimulation, the illusion of control through perpetual engagement. I sat, rigid, forcing myself to simply observe. The discomfort was physical. A tightness in my chest, a restless energy buzzing beneath my skin. My mind conjured scenarios. What-if trades that never materialized, fueling a quiet despair. This was the true battle, not against the market, but against the deeply ingrained habits of my own mind. I began to see the market differently, not as a beast to be tamed, but as a vast, indifferent ocean. My previous self had tried to swim against every current, to ride every ripple. Now I sought the deep, slow tides. I learned to distinguish between noise and signal, not through some new indicator, but through the calm detachment of my own mind. The urge to act didn't vanish entirely, but its grip weakened. Each successful instance of disciplined waiting, each avoided impulse trade, was a small victory. These victories were internal. They were not marked by profits, but by the preservation of capital, and more importantly, by the preservation of my mental peace. I started to understand that my worth as a trader was not defined by how many trades I made, but by the quality of the trades I didn't make. This shift in perspective was profound. I stopped chasing the market's approval, stopped seeking external validation for my intelligence or skill. The market was not there to affirm my ego. It was a mechanism, a complex system of supply and demand. My role was not to participate in every oscillation, but to identify the rare high-probability moments where my edge truly existed. This meant long periods of quiet observation. It meant embracing boredom. It meant sitting out entire days, sometimes weeks, feeling nothing but a calm readiness. The fear of missing out, once a raging inferno, dwindled to a faint ember. I realized that most missed opportunities were, in fact, avoided disasters. My capital, once a rapidly diminishing resource, began to stabilize. The slow bleed stopped. Then, almost imperceptibly, it started to grow. Not with the explosive, unsustainable gains I once chased, but with a steady, deliberate accumulation. Each trade now carried conviction. It was born, not from impulse or fear, but from a patient alignment of my strategy with the market's undeniable signals. The number of trades plummeted. The quality soared. This was the paradox Livermore understood. Less activity often yields greater results. The big money truly was in the waiting, in the disciplined patience that allowed for precise, high-impact action. My mind cleared. The constant internal chatter quieted. The exhaustion lifted. I found a new rhythm, a harmony with the market's natural pulse, rather than battling against it. The frantic energy that once consumed me was replaced by a quiet confidence. This was not overconfidence, but a deep trust in my process, in my patience, in my ability to say no to the siren call of constant action. The market was still indifferent, still unpredictable in its granular movements, but I was no longer its victim. I was an observer, a participant only when the odds were demonstrably in my favor. This transformation was not an overnight epiphany, but a grueling process of self-confrontation, of dismantling old beliefs, and forging new ones in the fires of past losses. The scar of the more you trade, the faster you lose remained, but it was no longer a fresh wound. It was a reminder, a teacher, a testament to the brutal, yet ultimately liberating, power of discipline over emotion. It was the quiet strength of knowing when to simply exist, to breathe, to wait. The quiet strength of knowing when to simply exist, to breathe, to wait. This was not a passive surrender. It was an active choice, a deliberate act of will. I learned to find comfort in the space between trades, in the vast, silent stretches where nothing of consequence occurred. The market's indifference, once a source of anxiety, became a canvas for observation. I watched, without agenda, without the gnawing need to participate. My mind, once a battlefield, became a quiet room. The incessant chatter of what if and should have began to fade. This newfound calm was not a constant state. The old impulses, the ingrained habits, they still surfaced. They whispered temptations. They conjured phantom opportunities. But their grip had loosened. Their power diminished with each conscious decision to step back, to wait. I recognized these urges for what they were. Echoes of a past self, a self driven by fear and ego. I saw them, acknowledged them, and let them pass. This internal vigilance became a practice, a daily, hourly commitment. It was more demanding than any trading strategy. It required a deeper kind of strength. The preservation of capital was a tangible result, but the true dividend was deeper. It was a liberation of mind. The mental bandwidth, once consumed by frantic activity, by the chase, by the anxiety of missed moves, was now free. Free to think clearly, free to observe without bias, free to live beyond the flickering screens. My identity as a trader shifted. It was no longer defined by activity, but by discernment, by the precision of my few well-chosen actions, by the courage to do nothing, when doing nothing was the correct path. I understood Livermore's profound wisdom in a new light. His emphasis on patience, on waiting for the market to confirm, was not a mere tactical suggestion. It was a psychological imperative, a fundamental truth about human nature and its perilous interaction with financial markets. He knew the enemy was often within, the relentless urge to act, to control, to prove. This was the enemy I had fought, and slowly, painfully, learned to disarm. The market was merely the stage. The real drama unfolded inside. The discipline I cultivated extended beyond the trading desk. It seeped into other areas of my life. The rush to judgment, the need for instant gratification, the fear of missing out on life's smaller moments, these too began to wane. I found a deeper appreciation for stillness, for observation, for the unhurried rhythm of existence. The constant pursuit of more, faster, bigger, started to feel like a hollow endeavor. True value, I realized, often lay in the quiet spaces, in the deliberate pauses, in the unforced unfolding of events. This wasn't about becoming emotionless. It was about becoming aware, about recognizing emotions for what they were: signals, not commands. Fear, greed, impatience, they were still present. They were part of the human condition, but I no longer allowed them to dictate my actions. I could observe them, understand their origins, and then choose a different path. A path guided by logic, by strategy, by the hard-won lessons of past mistakes. This was the essence of self-mastery in the market. A mastery not over external forces, but over internal vulnerabilities. The market continued its ceaseless dance. Volatile, unpredictable, alluring. But my relationship with it had changed fundamentally. It was no longer a personal challenge, a test of my ego. It was a vast, complex system. I was a small part of it, seeking only to participate when the confluence of factors presented a clear, undeniable edge. My entries became sharper, my exits more disciplined. My losses, when they occurred, were smaller, contained, and devoid of emotional baggage. They were simply data points, lessons for refinement, not reasons for panic or desperate re-engagement. The journey was not complete. It never would be. The market constantly evolves. Human nature remains constant in its flaws. But I now possessed the tools, the internal framework, to navigate its treacherous waters. The scars of past overtrading were reminders, not open wounds. They were the price of a brutal education, an education in patience, in discipline, in the profound wisdom of knowing when to simply wait. This was the quiet power, the enduring strength, the true wealth. And thus, the market, once a relentless adversary, became a stern teacher. The constant internal struggle, the anxiety of needing to act, gradually subsided, replaced by quiet confidence. I no longer sought to conquer the market, but to move with it, respecting its immense power. The fear of missing out, that insidious whisper, had been silenced by self-control. My trading journey evolved from a desperate sprint to a patient marathon. Capital, once a measure of emotional volatility, now reflected discipline. It was not about spectacular, fleeting gains, but consistent, sustainable growth, built on deliberate inaction. The true victory wasn't in any single winning trade, but in the profound shift within myself. I learned to trust the process, to value the wait, understanding that true opportunity emerges from the very stillness I once dreaded. The insights from Livermore, once abstract, became lived experience. His warnings against the human element, against emotion's destructive power, resonated deeply. He spoke of knowing when to be inactive, when to simply sit and observe. This was the profound wisdom I sought, found not in complex algorithms, but but in self-mastery's stark simplicity. The market will always be an endless ocean of opportunity and peril. But my relationship with it is now respectful engagement, not frantic participation. I enter only when factors align, when the signal is undeniable, and my edge clear. My actions are deliberate, risks calculated, patience unwavering. This transformation was the hardest trade, exchanging old habits for new wisdom, ego for humility. This path is open to anyone confronting internal demons. To acknowledge that trading's greatest challenge is internal, not external. To understand the urge to constantly engage, to do something, is often the fastest route to ruin. Therefore, I share this journey, not as prescription, but as reflection of a truth etched in markets. The more you trade, the faster you lose. Consider this. Reflect on your impulses. Ask if your activity serves strategy or merely ego. Embrace stillness. Find power in waiting. For in that disciplined pause, true opportunity and true wealth are found. If this resonates or sparks new perspective, like this message, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more insights on mastering the psychological game of markets.